It's been 2 weeks already, and here we are once again gathered around the bar, the Isobar, to talk all things weather at the Isobar. The highs and lows of meteorology, your fortnight of forecasting entertainment. How's that work for you guys?
That works. You're
That's a
getting
wonderful
fancier and
introduction.
fancier.
Last time around, we were the Chiefs of the Great Lakes, but we have a special guest today because Rich is exercising his chief-like priorities and doing something special for himself, which we love. And we are joined by one of our Fox meteorologists in Detroit, Stephanie Mead. Stephanie, how are
Hi.
you?
I'm good. Yeah, Rich, he's really heavily involved in the veteran community out here, and Veterans Day
Understandably.
is just around the corner. So he does a lot of stuff in November for the veteran community. So that's kind of where he's at today. But yeah, I'm really excited to join you guys to just talk about weather across the region. I'm a Midwest gal, and Emily is in my hometown of Chicago right now. So I'm excited to hear a little bit about
Yeah,
what's going on over there.
we flip-flopped. You're in my hometown, I'm in
Yes.
yours.
Hey, that's great. We have great representation.
Well, it's good that you are from the area because that's what we really kind of focus on. But of course, people from the Midwest, people from the Great Lakes end up all over the world, as we know, in this business and in all businesses. And so we got to have a bit of a global point of view as well. And that's where we're going to start out this week because we couldn't really be a weather podcast without talking at least a little bit about what happened with the Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Melissa, that came through Jamaica and then followed through Cuba and again up through the Caribbean, and fortunately stayed out over the open waters after that. But guys, this was an historic storm in so many ways, and we are just starting to see some of the fallout and some of the aftermath of this.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
path of it was very unique as it was getting started, right? So if you look at the overall path of Melissa, it kind of looped around several times in the Caribbean before making that northeasterly hook, and then of course making that devastating landfall, the strongest hurricane to ever hit Jamaica. And then that same night, it actually went ahead and made a landfall in Cuba, and then continued northward through the Bahamas. So we had
Wow.
a lot of devastation through that region, and it was very strong, as you mentioned. So it was a Category 5 at landfall for Jamaica, and then it began to lose some steam as it moved off toward the north and the northeast. But regardless, you're still talking about a hurricane making landfall, and there are some unique stats when it comes to the Atlantic season this year. So we've had 13 named storms, which actually puts us, I believe, within the range of the forecast that we were hearing about for the Atlantic this season. And we've had seven of which that were hurricanes, but five of those guys, or I mean, excuse me, three of those were Category 5 hurricanes. And the only other time on record that that's happened was in 2005 when we had Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting and sure. And interesting enough that it's so very close in time. Like you don't have to look that far back to see it because we are seeing such an amplification of that part of the world and that part of meteorology. But I want to let Stephanie chime in on this before we get too deep on that. I'm
Sure.
sure that you had some local connections there. It seems like we all had viewers that were stranded there or, families there. That's where they hail
For,
from.
for sure. Yeah. So we did have a couple of viewers that had family that were in Jamaica, unfortunately, when it all happened. And it is quite sad to see some of the stuff that's coming out right now. And of course, as you guys mentioned before, we're just going to continue to see more and more come out of this situation. I read an article, and I read the article that you sent over, Emily, in regards to how it was just like an interesting storm because it didn't necessarily go through that whole eye wall regentrification, which was very interesting, at least for me. And it was very interesting to see just like the aftermath of just how much of the island itself was just completely decimated and kind of just almost at ground zero after it hit. There wasn't a whole lot in terms of, the satellites getting a lot of power in certain areas. And of course, like the bigger cities within Jamaica, like Kingston, they seem to be pretty put together still, all things considered. So it's interesting to see just how devastating these storms could be. And it's good, I mean, at least for the US, that we didn't have to see any direct impact from a major hurricane this year, which is fantastic. But it's just really devastating just to see how strong these storms can develop and how quickly and interesting they can develop as well.
Right. And a lot of that comes down to how warm the water has become in that part of the world. One of the key elements to building a strong hurricane is that sea surface temperature of at least 80.
Mhm.
Well, the water in that region so much warmer than that and staying so much warmer for so much longer that, even as we get to the tail end of the season, you're still watching very closely for very strong storms.
Yeah, that's right. So the season, as we know, it runs through the end of November. That doesn't mean that you
Right.
absolutely cannot have something outside of that time frame, but the overall pattern here for the next couple of weeks, it does look promising. It looks like things are calming down. We're starting to see that more winter-like pattern developing, which involves more winds at the higher elevation. So that's going to hopefully rip apart some of these systems as they're trying to develop or before they even can. So hopefully things are really beginning to come to an end. But yeah, it was definitely a very busy week as we were tracking Melissa, but I'm hopeful that maybe we're done with the extreme storms coming out of the Atlantic.
Yeah, at least give us some catch up time. I think Jamaica, similar to, parts of the Gulf, like after Katrina, after Harvey, it's going to take years, not weeks or months. It's going to take years to get back to where they
Hmm.
were pre-storm. But yeah, I think it's fascinating to watch the response to this as well. I think there's been a lot of international response to it. I think there's been a lot of, interesting people. We just ran a story today about Shaggy uh, getting private jets to make runs with supplies and to help out. So I think it's wonderful to see the response to this, and I hope it also opens up the world to talking a bit more about what we can do as far as dealing with these things, providing the infrastructure for preparing that region for these storms, because there are going to be more like this. Unfortunately, we're not going to be waiting as long between these, and also more just to bring this whole concept of our warming planet back onto the front page, once we're done with the immediate response.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I just want to jump in one more time about hurricanes, and something that I was actually really surprised by is I had a lot of conversations with friends and family asking me questions specifically about hurricanes and how strong are they capable of getting. it's I'm glad people are starting to have these conversations, and oftentimes things that should be grabbing the headlines, they don't sometimes, and this time with Melissa, it really grabbed the headlines, and your average Joe was learning about weather and being intrigued by it, and something that I think a lot of people really started to understand with this, at least I can judge from my own friends and family of the conversations that I had, was being able to explain how these storms, unfortunately, they are becoming more frequent, so then that opens the conversation of why
Right.
is that, or what are those contributing factors. So I think there's a larger conversation that's starting to happen when we are seeing more and more of these extreme events.
Yeah. I mean, are you having the same experience in the Detroit area, Stephanie, or are people talking about it more?
You know, I came from a little family get together too on Sunday, and there were a few questions about it, and there were folks, of course, interested in just the whole length of hurricane season itself, because I also don't think people realize how deep into what it feels like almost winter for us
Hey,
it
yeah.
continues as tropical weather for folks just a little further south of us. So I think that also gets a lot of people interested in, like, oh, okay, like this is an extended season. And I think it also puts into perspective on just, again, how devastating Mother Nature can be, and where, folks, like to vacation or just like to
Right.
go to have a good time. Unfortunately, folks that live on those spots don't necessarily, experience the same, at least, calmness when we do go to their area. So I think
Hmm.
it
Sure.
just,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
I think it
that's
just
home for
puts in,
them. Right. Yeah.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
puts into perspective just how devastating actual weather and big time weather can be, especially, in Michigan, because we're not getting hit by that stuff on a regular basis at all.
Hmm.
We'll get hit by, leftovers and remnants of it, but
Sure.
nothing to that extent. So I think to your point, Emily, it does open up a bigger conversation and how people can help. But also, I was reading too that a lot of, what they grow, the direct path was right over that area. So they're going to be dealing with a lot of agriculture issues too moving forward. So
Yeah.
it's just going
That's
to
a
be
really
a
good
tough
point.
time, I think. for folks in Jamaica and Cuba and also parts of the Bahamas.
Yeah, right.
So
We'll have to keep all of that, of course, in the forefront of our minds, and we'll keep checking back on that story, here on this show, and of course in all of our different markets as well. But let's return to home and look a little farther into the past by looking all the way back to October, because I think in all three cities, Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, October was an interesting month to say the least. It had some highs, it had some lows, literally and figuratively speaking. I'll kind of start, and then I definitely want to hear how things played out for you guys. But we just kind of crunched the numbers the other day, as we do at the beginning of every new month. And looking back for the Milwaukee area, the average temperature, the high and low, averaged out over the course of the month was a little over 63, 63.3. So a little on the warm side. 2 degrees
yeah.
on the warm side there. We did manage to have two 87-degree days. We do not get very many 87-degree days in Milwaukee or in Wisconsin in October. And granted, it was very beginning of the month, but to have them there was pretty impressive. And we were a little dry, actually. It was an interesting stretch, obviously, mostly post-growing season for the vast majority of our viewers. But we ended up a good 2/3 of an inch below the average when it came to precipitation. And we were, kind of half watching the drought monitor, just because you kind of want to be in a healthy spot going into the winter. Plus, with the dry conditions and the wind like we've seen recently, it sets us up for fire weather. So it was definitely an interesting October here in Wisconsin and in Bruce City. What about down the road in Chicago?
Well, in Chicago, very similar to what you were just explaining. The first half of October, it was way warmer than average. We actually had an 89-degree day in that
Yeah.
first week of October. So we didn't actually make it to 90, but we were very close. Although a lot of our suburbs around the region did hit the 90s, if not the low to mid 90s. So a very unusual start to our October. But then about halfway through, we saw this pattern flip, and it was kind of back to reality. So the first half was near or warmer than average. Second half was near or cooler than average. So things kind of averaged out. We still ended up warmer than normal by about 3.4 degrees, which is significant. But of those weeks at the beginning of October, they really set the bar very high with the heat that we had. And then as far as precipitation goes, we ended up seeing about 8/10 of an inch of rain, shy of what's considered to be average. So
Okay.
we were a little drier than average at O'Hare. So we're kind of still moving forward with the drought conditions. We saw briefly conditions that actually improved a few weeks ago, but now we're on the downswing again, and things have been getting
Right.
worse. Many of our suburbs, most of northeastern Illinois, is considered to be in either a moderate or a severe drought now. Northwest Indy is doing okay, considered to be abnormally dry, and we actually have a few pockets that were completely removed from the abnormally dry conditions. So things are looking okay in portions of the viewing area, but northeastern Illinois, we're kind of still in the thick of it as we're gearing up for winter. And as you mentioned, that's just not what you want to see going into the winter season.
Right. Running a deficit going into winter leaves you, struggling as you get to spring and start the growing season all over again. Now, Chicago and Milwaukee, of course, both on Lake Michigan. So it's notable what you said, that like suburbs got hotter. You didn't get the, glory of actually hitting the full 90, but that you had that in the burbs. Same here in Milwaukee. We got to 87 at Mitchell, which is literally about 5 miles as the crow flies from the lakeshore. But, we had many spots, Janesville, Beloit, that cracked the 90s a couple of times in October. Now, Detroit's not on Lake Michigan, but it is definitely on the Great Lakes. What
Yeah.
about you over in Detroit, Stephanie?
Yeah, so it was just as hot for us here in Southeast Michigan for sure. We saw 4 consecutive days in a row in the 80s, which doesn't happen a whole lot in Southeast Michigan. And we saw a day in the upper 80s at 87. And then we had 2 days in the mid 80s at 85. And that happened, of course, all at the beginning of the month, kind of like your guys' weather. It was dry. We did have drought conditions for a good chunk of even the state throughout at least the first half of the month. And we really didn't pick up a whole lot of rain for the month of October. I think we were around that 3/4 of an inch mark. So we were at a deficit at almost 2 inches. So we did not see a whole lot in terms of rain here. And I think the most we saw in a 24-hour span was about a quarter of an inch. So it was exceptionally dry for us here. It was warm, like Emily mentioned, for even us here, at least for the first half of the month. And then once we started getting towards the end of the month, that's when it started to get a bit closer to our seasonal temperatures, which is usually in the middle 50s. And I think we wrapped the month on a pretty good note. We were at around the middle 50s in terms of our daytime highs. So as a whole, I think for the month, we were around 3 degrees above the average. And I think the coolest temperature we had, including our overnight lows, was like 36. So we didn't
Okay.
even hit near freezing for overnight lows. So it was a very
That's
warm
pretty
month for us.
notable to not get even to a freeze through the whole month of
Mhm.
Yeah.
October.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did not get that. And I mean, moving forward, of course, and we'll probably touch on this. We most certainly are going to.
Yeah,
So
right. We are in November now, turn to the corner for sure. But as we've talked about in a lot of these episodes through the last few months here, Michigan has been the probably the worst off when it's come to precipitation. You guys didn't get a lot of the soaking rains that Chicago, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Illinois got, and so a lot of the agricultural interests in Michigan are really playing from behind.
yeah, it's and even to start off the month of November, we still really
Yeah.
haven't seen a whole lot in terms of moisture, and we really don't have a whole lot moving forward. Sure, we have like a sporadic chance tomorrow and by the end of the week, but these really need to be like soaking all day rains, and we really don't have a whole lot of that moving forward. So I'm hoping over the course of the next month, or maybe for the winter season, we're able to make that up, whether it's with snow or
Right.
whether it's with rain, whatever we can get at this point.
Yeah, we definitely want the best for our farmers because we want the best on our plates, right? We're all
Yeah.
foodies these days, and the food starts there. As we learned from Rich a couple of episodes ago, soybeans that's the Michigan product that we've got to watch out there, and
Yep.
that goes into a lot more than you'd expect. So we
Yeah.
hope for the best for our farmers in all three of our regions. All right, let's look ahead, though. We'll look ahead past the growing season to November. The trend in our region is an interesting one because we're still talking, at least here in Wisconsin, and from what I remember from looking at the outlook for all of our regions, at least for the Chicago and Milwaukee region, we're trending warmer. But of
Mhm.
course, that's kind of like, there's an asterisk on that to some extent because that warmer than average is based on an average that is dropping pretty rapidly. That average high is going to be in the low 40s for us by the end of November, but it's still on the milder side.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people they're hopeful when they see those maps that are lit up with the orange and the reds, right? People instantly think, "Oh, hey, it's going to be warm." That's one point that I really try to drive home with people is just because you see these warmer than average temperatures on these maps, you really have to think about what average is going to be by the time you reach mid-November, late November, and about every 2 days at O'Hare, we're seeing our average high temperatures dropping by a degree. So yes, dropping very quickly here, but the next week or so, we're not looking at warmer than average
Right.
temperatures here in the region. So,
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are going to be happy in hoping that we see those temps trending back upward
There you
here
go.
after the next weekend.
Well, that's a very good point because when we talk about these things, as a note to our listeners and viewers right now, we're talking about an average of the averages. It doesn't mean every day in the next 30, 60, or 90 is going to be above, but it does mean as a trend, we're seeing that. Now, what about Detroit, though? Because, one
Yeah.
thing about our region is that you're on the far eastern side, whole other time zone.
Right.
So, what's November looking like for you?
It's looking cool to start. I mean, our temperatures right now, I mean, we're in the 60s today, so it feels great. But I think moving forward, especially as we head into the weekend and early next week, it is looking below average. And then moving forward, I think even through the 3 to 4 week outlook, we are well above average. And I even have to tell myself sometimes that even though we do see those bright oranges and those
Uh,
really deep reds, that doesn't mean it's going to be like the 70s. I think I have to mentally tell myself that every time. But yeah, I think through the end of the month and even looking at the extended December and even into January, I feel like we're just looking at exceptionally warmer temperatures here across the state of Michigan. So it's not just even us across Southeast Michigan, it's pretty much across the board, which at the end of the day, has it been any different than what we have been experiencing over the past couple of months? No.
yeah.
So I don't know if people are going to be too surprised if it is going to be feeling warmer, through November or December.
Right. And I think you touched on this earlier, but there's not a lot of hope coming in the November precip trends either.
No, and I mean, we're in, the potential of maybe seeing slightly above average, or there is that potential, but what does that really mean?
Right.
As we get towards the middle of the month, could we see a little bit more rain? Is that going to help us out in terms of the deficit we're already experiencing here across Southeast Michigan? We'll have to wait and see if that actually helps out, because we are really needing every drop we can get at this point, but is it really going to help us out in getting us to, I think last we checked, we needed about 4 inches to kind of get us out of that
Wow.
deficit or so. So, I mean, we'll take any bit we can get at this point, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's not looking super promising in terms of that soaking all day rain or periods of very heavy rain for us here.
Right. Well, and as we get into the winter season, typically a drier season, people know
Yeah.
that because of how it impacts their skin. Dew points are very low, and there's just not a lot of moisture to draw on. So even if you
Yeah.
get several inches of snow, that's still not a lot of liquid equivalent. So that'll be
No.
a bit of a struggle. Any notable trends for Chicago, Illinois when it comes to precip, Emily?
Not really at this point. So very similar to what we were just hearing from Stephanie. We've got, a couple things coming our way in the next few weeks or so, but nothing crazy as far as
Right.
going to be drought busters for us. If we look ahead though to the 3 month outlook, so we have that very typical pattern with the precipitation outlook, and we'll throw that up here for you guys to see that. But it looks like that we have at least the chance of seeing above average precipitation, but
Mhm.
a lot of people have been grabbing onto this map, and I don't know how it is in your markets, but I would assume it's about the same. And people are like, wow, we're going to get so much snow
Yes.
this winter.
Yeah.
Right,
And,
right.
you still have to think about, you have to have the cold temperatures too. So you
Right.
have to think about that temperature, that vertical temperature profile, and whether or not that's going to come down as snow or rain. So every time somebody asks me, like, is this going to be a really bad winter? Are we going to have, major snowstorms coming through? I
Yeah.
just always say plan for winter the way you always do. We're going to have those cold snaps. We're going to have those systems that come through where some areas probably pick up 6+ inches of snow,
Mhm.
but it's just very situational, and it comes down to the temps. So just because we have that 3 month outlook from the Climate Prediction Center that shows above average precipitation, that
Yeah.
doesn't equate to snow.
I
Yeah.
think people want to hear the snow. They're like, "Oh, we
I
want the
know.
snow." Like, I get it. We want it too.
No, I
But
mean,
yeah,
and people who have winter sports that require the snow, I mean, we had a really rough time in northern Wisconsin this past winter. The snowmobile trails, the ice fishing, all of that kind of just didn't happen, or it happened for a much shorter window. So there's a huge crowd that wants all of that. And
yeah.
I'm afraid we might disappoint everybody and just give them a slushy mess.
Hmm.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun. But I think too, people do forget about those temperatures,
Yeah.
and they just think winter, and they're like, "Oh, it's automatically going to be cold." So of
Mhm.
course, then that automatically means snow.
Yeah. And it will
Um,
be cold, but maybe not
yeah,
cold enough, right?
yeah, or cold enough when we actually get snow.
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
lot of it has to line up pretty much perfectly in order to get the snow to fall, and
Mhm.
the ground temperatures play a role too sometimes, and
Right, the soil
a
for
lot.
sure. Yeah, it all makes sense. And at the end of the day, some of those averages can be thrown off if we get more liquid precip events than we would have in another winter because, sure, it's more precip. That's still going to be more precip because the liquid is 10 to 1 when it comes to the snow, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a big winter, right? You used it all up in your half-inch worth of rain. That would have been a big snowfall, but nope, you got a half
Right.
inch worth of rain, which was kind of a
Yeah.
non-event. So the averages can be deceiving sometimes. Now, we all do, though, live right beside a giant snow machine. So we don't actually even necessarily need an active low pressure center to bring us snow. We've got lake effect snow. Now, on the western side of Lake Michigan, we don't do too badly here. In southeastern Wisconsin, you need a really precise setup with just the right angle on the wind to catch the water and deliver back some snow. But of course, up into the UP and parts of northern Wisconsin off Lake Superior, they get hammered over and over and over again. And Emily, you're right at the tail end of Lake Michigan. So definitely a bigger issue for you, lake effect snow coming up.
Yes, for our Northwest Indiana friends. So
True, yeah.
our viewing area does kind of it hooks all the way around over to the Michigan border, so taking us basically all the way over to Michigan City. So I think we're going to see some lake effect. But something that we do have to think about too is the ground temperatures are still well above the freezing mark at this point. So
Oh,
as that the snow's falling, then it looks like a lot of it's probably going to melt on contact. But when you're talking about lake effect, and everybody that lives in this region, we're very familiar with that, right? So you have those bands of really, really heavy snow. Well, those higher snow rates can very easily overcome that cold or the warmer ground temperatures. So,
right.
I do think early next week, we're looking at some northwesterly wind flow. It's mainly going to be West Michigan's problem,
Yep.
which I keep telling everybody here, like it's mainly a Michigan problem. But I think, as those winds kind of turn a little more to the northwest, it is going to clip at least portions of Northwest Indiana. But as far as northeastern Illinois, we're safe from it. We're not worried about it just yet.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the same boat as southeastern Wisconsin. It has to be a perfect setup. Chicago does get some lake effect, events like we do here in Milwaukee. But you're right, that portion of Michigan. But over in Detroit, I mean, you're not safe from it either over there, Stephanie.
No, we're not. I think if winds are strong enough, we usually get some of those lake effect snow bands that get pushed from even western parts of the state into
Mhm.
southeast Michigan. But it's kind of almost like your guys' setup too, where winds have to come off perfectly from Lake Huron or even Lake Erie occasionally to kind of get some of that lake effect stuff. We are anticipating a little bit of winter weather early next week, and people here are very excited and just kind of running with some of the forecasts that have been going around, whether it's from, the local news source or whoever else is posting it out there. But yeah, we do get a few lake effect events for us here. It's just the winds have to be strong enough to push some of that into our part of the state. I mean, we just, I think, finished up a rain effect, a rain lake effect event
Right.
last week. So winds were strong enough to push that. And I do think winds probably are going to be strong enough to push some of that snow in our direction, possibly Sunday, but most likely on Monday.
Yeah, and this obviously will just be the first of many potential events
For
throughout the
sure.
next few
Yeah.
months that we'll be keeping an eye on. And let's face it, November is the notoriously windy month, but I'm sure it's the same. You've experienced the same, Stephanie, as Emily and I have. It's been windy like for months.
Yeah, it's been windy for months, but especially like the past couple of days for us,
Sure.
it has been exceptionally windy here. So there's no more fall leaves on our trees anymore. They
Uh,
are gone.
yeah.
But it has been very windy. The one thing I haven't noticed here is the excessive fog. We haven't really been seeing a whole lot of that.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good that you bring up the leaves. Did anybody get out to get some great photos? Because here, anyway, if you blinked, you missed it because we were kind of at peak and then they all got blown out of the trees.
So we still
Ours,
have ours.
Oh,
you
okay.
do?
So we should go down to
Yeah,
Chicago.
we still have the leaves here. Yeah, just come over, but make it here quickly because we have some wind coming too. Yeah, we were late this year as far as the peak color, peak fall foliage. We were definitely later than usual this year, so we still have very, very beautiful trees at this point that are just now starting. Those maples that are just now starting to drop their leaves. So it's very pretty right now. But yes, we have windy days ahead of us. It's going to be
Yeah.
gusty this upcoming weekend and early next week as well. So days are limited, but for right now, it's still pretty.
Yeah. Do you have a spot there? Because everybody's got that one beautiful Instagram worthy spot. Is there a go-to in the
I mean,
Chicago?
I love Lincoln Park Zoo, and up near that area because there's a lot of trees and just a lot of nature to just look and take in. But also, it's very picturesque of Chicago. The Bean.
Oh, yeah,
It's
sure.
there's stunning trees all around it right now that are this really vibrant reds and orange. So it looks beautiful right now.
Yeah. No, that's a good point because you don't think about downtown Chicago as being a place to go
Yeah.
look at the leaves.
Right.
But you're right, that's a cool shot. Stephanie, what's your go-to spot in the Detroit area?
Well, in the Detroit area, I feel like if you just drive up 75, you don't even have to get out of your car. You can just see all of the really pretty foliage that's just kind of sprinkling some of these really pretty colors because I live actually a little further north of the city and we've completely lost all of our trees that just because of the leaves and the blowing and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But downtown Detroit itself, we're starting to see some, we were late because of just the very warm conditions and the drought
Mhm.
conditions too. And I've also noticed that colors here aren't necessarily as vibrant as last year either. They've been kind of
Okay.
muted, dull, and also just brown. They've died on the tree itself and just
Yeah.
fell. So we didn't
That
actually
makes
have,
sense with the drought. Sure.
yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
have as bright or as nice as a fall foliage as last year, I noticed. But I think 75 is the place to be, just kind of driving up and down that stretch. Um,
I'll
within
put that in my to-do list when I visit the area for sure. And if you're ever in the Milwaukee area, the go-to, like really close to the city, is a place called Holy Hill, where there are some nice rolling hills, as the name would suggest. There's a beautiful old church there, and the foliage is just wonderful. You get these amazing shots. And of course, if you really want a road trip, you got to go up to Door County with the classic. I'm sure you've all seen it, the winding road that winds back on itself, and then you look down and see all the trees. But again, the window, there's still some patches. I'm sure you can get some great shots, but with this wind, it's winding down. All right, speaking of winding down, we're about to wind down, but I want to look back. We've been talking a little bit about weather lore, and I made note of a couple of things from October to watch out for. And we'll see, whether you guys remember much and see how it plays out. But one of the things that weather lore taught us back in our ancestors' day with it was that if there's much rain in October, it means much wind in December. Now, we all three said we
Mm,
had a pretty dry
yeah.
October.
yeah.
So maybe that'll turn off that lake effect snow machine come December because the big key component is the wind.
I
And
feel like a
then,
lot of people would be very sad about that.
Yeah.
right, yeah, I
Yes.
completely agree. Yeah.
Especially in Western Michigan. Or
Yeah.
maybe they
Yeah.
wouldn't be sad. Who knows?
Well, like we said up the top, some of those communities that they kind of thrive in the winter because it's where everybody goes to enjoy
Yeah,
the snow. And
very
then
true.
I think Stephanie, you brought up something about fog earlier. So according to ancient weather lore, for every fog in October, there will be a fog. Well, there will be a snow in the winter.
Man, I can't even tell. I think we probably had maybe one or two foggy mornings. Like
Okay.
that really wasn't a part of our forecast at all in October.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely had a few. I think at least two or three dense fog advisories, even toward the end of the month. Was Chicago foggy?
We had a few days here or there toward
Yeah.
the end of
Yeah.
October, and even early this month, we've had a couple days, mainly far out in the burbs. But for the most part, it really has not been the typical fall foggy season that we would normally see.
Okay. And then the last one was that, if there's no frost by the full moon in October, that means there'll be no frost until the full moon in November. That definitely did not play out here at
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
all. We didn't have a frost because the first full moon was actually pretty early in October. We definitely have had numerous frosts since, I'm assuming, the same Chicago, Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing for us.
All right. So not all the old weather lore holds up, but we'll have to put a little pin in it, and we'll circle back on the snow versus fog, and we'll just see how windy December ends up being based on how dry our Octobers were. Are you snow fans? I mean, I feel like we all kind of were like, oh, I don't want to deal with snow. For me, that's like more of a driving thing, though, because I actually like the snow. I like a cold, crisp winter morning. I don't ski, but I do ice skate, and there's nothing more fun than an outdoor skate, like either on, Red Arrow Park, which is like a downtown rink here in Milwaukee, or just on a pond somewhere. Do you have a winter thing you love though?
So I always
Ah,
grew up snowmobiling. I'm
Okay.
from the Michigan area, and that's a big thing there. Everybody goes up north, up to the UP. So I grew up snowmobiling. I haven't done a ton of that in my adult life now that I don't live with my parents who have all of the machines, right?
But you not got a
um,
snowmobile right down to the bean?
no, no, I don't.
You'd get
But
some great
I
looks.
do. I know we really would. But I do. I grew up snowboarding and I love winter and it's my favorite season to work in. Now, if you're asking personal Emily, I love summer the most, but working Emily as a meteorologist, I love winter. I love lake effect snow. I love talking about those forecasts. So I always get a little excited going into the season.
There you
yeah,
go.
I'm the same way. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
Very good.
I love just forecasting the winter months, but personally, I despise driving in it. I think if you did get some of those snowmobiles, though, you might get around Chicago probably a little bit easier, Emily, for to and from work.
You never
But
know.
Yeah, I have a husky, so I think I'm forced
Ah,
into liking the or the winter months. So I'm starting to enjoy it a little bit more. Growing up in Chicago, I really didn't do anything in terms of like skiing or snowmobiling. I was just kind of more just out there having snowball fights and building snowmen with my siblings. So obviously, I am not doing that now. But I think I'm starting to get used to the winter season once again. But driving in that's not fun in any
oh,
capacity.
yeah, and particularly if we do end up with the slushy version of the forecast that we talked about earlier, I'd rather drive in full-on snow or dry than that
Hmm.
mix. That wintry mix is always the worst and the most dangerous. I want to thank you both. Of course, Emily, you're a regular here. Stephanie, thank you so much for stepping into
Hi.
Rich's shoes.
Thanks for
You
having
did
me
a
on.
fantastic job. We'll pretend we missed Rich just for his ego,
Hi.
but but we loved having you, and you're welcome
Thank
back
you.
anytime. And please tell Rich thank you for his service and for what he does for his community as well.
I will definitely let him know. Thanks for having me on. This was so much fun.
Thank you both. That's been another edition of the Isobar, the highs and lows of meteorology.